Combat can be either a gripping, tense encounter with crazy shenanigans and impromptu decisions causing epic twists and turns, or it can be a bunch of static creatures standing around desperately waiting for hit points to drop and wishing for this torturous situation to end. Now, one way to really amp up your fights I recommend all game masters do is consistently structure combat around objectives that don't always have to be kill everyone, like travel to a magical portal before your party is overrun by demons, or protect the messenger who's being attacked by bandits. Objectives give your party focus and help funnel their creativity and efforts, but you can find many other resources or videos talking about objective-based combat, which is why this video is about the next step. It's about how you can make combat even spicier by increasing its intensity in stages. Because guess what? Even if you have an objective, combat can still be dull if it's the same old shit the entire time. He tries to hit you with an axe, you try hitting him with a firebolt, rinse and repeat, blah blah blah. And so, hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to my hidden nerdy side, and today we're gonna go over making fun and awesome combat in Dungeons & Dragons or any other tabletop RPG by running it in stages. So what do I mean by this? Well, a stage would be a new additional feature tossed into combat after a specific amount of time has elapsed or certain conditions have been met. Now, some of you might think of D&D 5e's mythic actions or lair actions. Mythic actions usually triggering after a creature drops to 0 HP, and lair actions triggering every time the initiative count hits 20. These are great tools going in the right direction, but we can definitely take it a step or two further, because when you look at lair and mythic actions, it's usually just a couple extra cool abilities that might fit the creature's lore, but that's about it. To really utilize combat in stages, each stage should build upon the one before it, adding an extra element or new twist to the current situation without detracting from the overall objective. This not only gives your combat a feeling of freshness, but it can also give it a clear direction and create a sense of urgency. Let's look at an example from one of my own games. I had a villain called Aberrat Ola Moira. He was a powerful mage who used to be the headmaster from one of my world's most prestigious mage colleges before he turned evil and joined a group of rogue mages. And his shtick was he could freely manipulate ice. Using illusionary magic, he lured my players into an ice cave and ambushed them. Now, this guy was set up from the beginning to be incredibly powerful, and so the real objective was to escape the cave with their lives. But of course, if they wanted to kill him, they absolutely could try. And they certainly wanted to, since he had an incredibly high bounty on his head. Now, the first time I ran this, it was in a big open space in the middle of an ice cave. I gave him a bunch of ice spells, homebrewed a few ice abilities, gave him a couple homebrew ice elementals, and went at it. And guess what? It sucked, because all that happened was he tossed a bunch of damage at my players until combat was over. However, I still liked the concept of Aberrat and the whole ice cave ambush, and so the next time I ran him, I decided every single time the initiative count hit 20, Aberrat would use his powers of ice manipulation to alter the battlefield, and how he manipulated the battlefield would build upon the previous manipulation. So with his first action, he placed his hand on the ground and melted the floor covered in ice just enough to make it slippery, causing creatures to move around like it's difficult terrain, or move normally but risk slipping and falling on a failed DC 15 dexterity saving throw. Then the next action, he caused icy walls and pillars to erect from the ground, adding terrain the players had to navigate while also having their movement hindered. Then the next lair action, he caused icicles hanging from the ceiling to fall down, causing everyone to make a dexterity saving throw to avoid them. However, because the floor was so slippery from before, they had disadvantage on the saving throw. And then after that, he created a modified version of Sleet Storm around himself, making it difficult for players to know where he is amongst all this icy carnage, and on it went. Running combat like this not only allowed my players to activate their minds and come up with big brain solutions for each incoming problem, but it also created a sense of urgency, because they needed to either kill Aberrat fast or get the hell out of there before shit gets even crazier and completely out of control. Now, this is a hyper example of of combat in stages. And essentially, what we've talked about so far is evolved mythic or lair actions that build upon each other. This is quite advanced, and honestly, even though this is awesome to do now and then, doing this every single combat encounter would be way too exhausting for both you and your players. But to properly use combat in stages, the stages don't have to be something new and intense every single round. It could happen every second round, or third, or even on a map-by-map basis. For example, let's say your players are storming a castle, and they need to get to its main keep to oust a corrupt queen. Your players have a small army at their disposal comprised of 200 rebels. The plan is to have the rebels storm the gates and help clear a path for your party so they can get to the main keep as fast as possible. Let's say the rebels already broke down the door and somewhat cleared a path. Your players hop in and see the carnage all around them but continue to soldier on. Then they hit a section of our city where there are simply too many town guards and combat ensues, introducing stage 1. After your players take them out, they move on to a different map and onto the second stage, where there is a street that slowly ascends up 20 feet over a length of 120 feet. They need to go that way to make it to the keep, but there are guards at the top rolling flaming barrels filled with explosives down the sloping street, and if your players are hit by a barrel, it will explode and deal a lot of damage. After your players make it to the top, they enter a new map and our third stage, which is a fight in the castle courtyard where more powerful town guards exist and also a couple of court mages. And then finally, at stage 4, your players enter the main keep and fight the queen's right hand and all her crazy legendary actions while her minions do their best to try and evacuate the queen, creating a balancing act between fighting the queen's right hand while also trying to stop the queen from escaping. So you see, every time your players enter a different map, the game changes a little bit each time to keep the entire combat fresh while also staying true to the overall objective, which is get the queen. The first combat is more of a warm-up. I'd probably enact the minion rule, which is essentially all the town guards have 1 HP. This lets your players flex their muscles, have a bit of fun, and really emulate the fact they are heroes in this battle. Then the second stage is more so a skill test, where they get to interact with the environment by hiding behind houses to avoid explosions, dip and dodge their way up the incline, and maybe even try to explode the barrels before they are hit. Hell, I could also see your players try to blow the barrels up at the top while they're being lit, creating a wonderfully cinematic moment. Then the third stage is pretty much a more intense version of our first encounter, but because of the introduction of new elements such as more powerful guards and also magic users, it feels different despite it being just more combat. And then the final stage is, of course, the grand finale, where your queen's right hand will have some homebrew abilities to add more flavor and diversity to your combat, while the intensity is increased since your players are actively seeing their prime objective trying to escape. Every stage, we change something up bit by bit, and despite it essentially being combat the entire time, every area gets to have a different feeling since we have variety, both with enemies and tactics. But we're not done yet because, of course, you can add mini stages into our grander quests that are unique to their specific stage. For example, what if during our flaming barrel stage, citizens are sprinting around trying to avoid danger and a child sprints across the street while barrels are rolling down? Now your players have to make a split-second decision. Do they try and save him or treat his death as a known casualty of our current situation? Because after one round, that child will be hit, and seeing what things your players come up with in the moment will be fantastic. Does the barbarian try to body block the barrel? Does your wizard chuck a firebolt at it to try and prematurely blow it up? Is your party cold-blooded and simply say, "Sorry kid, you done messed up"? Well, there's only one way to find out. And guess what? You can also have mini stages that apply to the encounter overall. all. For example, what if every 4 rounds you roll a d4 and that's how many more town guards show up to any given encounter, adding another factor to this already intense castle invasion. However, you have to remember, just because you plan a bunch of stages, never forget to allow your players to change the outcome based on their actions, because sometimes dungeon masters can get lost in all the crazy stuff they have planned and forget the real reason why this game exists. For example, say your players arrive at our flaming barrel encounter, and the sorcerer decides to cast fly on everyone and dip out. That's totally fine and 100% okay. You don't need to freak out and quickly homebrew a flaming barrel catapult so you can attack your players in the sky. Simply let them shine. Another example would be, what if your party ends up rallying 400 rebels instead of 200? So now they have enough manpower to stop the random town guard showing up as your players move forward. Also, what if as soon as your party enters the main keep, your wizard dimension doors straight to the queen, puts a knife to her throat, and tells everyone to drop their weapons? That's an awesome move, and it's okay to have your queen's right hand start to sweat and possibly comply, because the point of combat in stages isn't to write the story for your players. Its purpose is to keep combat fresh, allow your players to channel their creative energy, and help your players' actions feel more impactful. And if you can do that, well, you'll be one step closer to being a better game master.